Scary cartoon truths that would terrify you, Part 1.
Peppa Pig was diagnosed with cancer at just 2 years old and spent most of her early life in bed. She needed constant assistance and 24-hour supervision from her parents just to keep her alive. Peppa was an embarrassment and a burden to the whole family. But one day her dad had enough and got a horrible idea. He decided to chain Peppa to her bed so she could never leave her room again. Years later, her parents had another child, which they named Peppa. This Peppa replaced the original Peppa, who is still locked inside her room. And if you Google Peppa Pig house wallpaper, something terrifying comes up. At first glance, you can't see it, but if you zoom in, you can see the original Peppa still locked inside of her room.
These are the deadliest TikTok trends to ever exist.
Up first is the Benadryl challenge. This was a challenge where everybody basically took a bunch of Benadryl. You may be wondering why they were doing this, and it's because apparently it makes you hallucinate. But taking this much Benadryl can also cause death. And that's what happened to a young girl who attempted the Benadryl challenge. Next up is the Blackout challenge, aka the choke game. This was a challenge where people just stopped themselves from breathing so that they would pass out unconscious. And as a result from this challenge, 7 kids allegedly died. This is actually insane, and nobody should ever do these challenges again.
Scary cartoon truths that would terrify you, Part 2.
Candace has lost her mind due to bad things happening in her life. Phineas was her little brother, and he was picked on in school a lot because the other kids thought he was too nerdy. One day, a bully punched Phineas in the head extremely hard, and it killed him. That day changed Candace forever. Candace couldn't deal with Phineas's death, so she built an imaginary world where Phineas was still alive and playing with her stepbrother Ferb. Ferb has a disability, and he can't talk or do much, but she imagines him and Phineas going on great adventures together. And the real reason Phineas's mother can't see the things they built is because they're simply not there. And the more Candace tries to convince her mother, the more crazy she becomes.
These are the deadliest TikTok trends to ever exist, Part 2.
Up first is the Cha-Cha Slide Challenge. In this challenge, people would drive to the song The Cha-Cha Slide, and whenever the song went to the left or to the right, you would basically swerve your car in that direction. And a lot of people would just swerve into oncoming traffic. The amount of people that got into a car crash doing this challenge is absolutely crazy. And the fact that people actually did this makes no sense. Next up is the Tide Pod Challenge. Everybody remembers this challenge, and it was definitely one of the deadliest. In this challenge, people would just eat Tide Pods, which, as you could assume, isn't healthy for you. And as of right now, 8 people have died from doing this challenge. So whatever you do, never eat a Tide Pod.
Scary cartoon truths that would terrify you, Part 3.
Have you ever wondered why Timmy Turner and Danny Phantom look alike? Well, the show Danny Phantom is actually Timmy Turner's life as a teenager. After Timmy made his last wish to make him and all his friends superheroes, Timmy grew up to be Danny Phantom, Chester grew up to be Dash, Trixie grew up to be Paulina, Tootie grew up to be Sam, and finally AJ grew up to be Tucker. But the craziest thing is, you can actually see them all grown up in Danny Phantom.
These are the deadliest TikTok trends to ever exist, Part 3.
Up first is the Silhouette Challenge. In this challenge, people would stand in a doorway and stand there in sexy poses and dance to a music rhythm. And the backlit red light makes the people appear like a mysterious shadow. However, the Silhouette Challenge started becoming a serious problem. People took advantage of this to edit TikTok videos that exposed the female body. Some edited clips were even posted online without the consent of the owner. Next up is the Throw It in the Air Challenge. In this challenge, a group of friends would stand in a circle, looking down at their phone that was placed on the ground. Then they would throw random objects in the air, and the challenge was to not let it hit your head. But people started going too far with this challenge and started throwing things in the air like a ladder, dumbbell weights, and even computers. And this resulted in a lot of people being injured.
Scary cartoon truths that would terrify you, Part 4.
Ash is actually in a coma throughout the whole show and is completely dreaming everything. This is why he doesn't age or celebrate his birthday. He was also put on heavy medication to stabilize his coma dreams, so instead of being terrifying, they are perfect, which allowed him to live out his Pokemon Master fantasies. And everybody Ash meets on his journey represents aspects of himself that he has to overcome before he wakes up. And each Pokemon on his team represents a different issue he is battling.
These are the deadliest TikTok trends to ever exist, Part 4.
Up first is the Penny Challenge. This challenge involves sliding a penny behind a partially plugged-in iPhone charger. And as you could assume, this challenge electrocuted people and started fires. I don't even know how something like this becomes a challenge. And the craziest part is, a student at Plymouth North High School caused a fire in school by doing this.
These are scary cartoon truths that would terrify you, Part 5.
The Rugrats were actually a figment of Angelica's disturbing imagination. Chucky died in 1986 along with his mother, and that's why Chaz is a nervous wreck all the time. Tommy was born in 1988, but he was a stillborn, and that's why Stu is constantly in the basement making toys for the son who never had a chance to live. The DeVilles had an abortion in 1990, and Angelica couldn't figure out whether it would be a boy or a girl, thus creating the twins. As for the show All Grown Up, the teenage Angelica became addicted to many drugs, which further aggravated her schizophrenia, bringing her right back to her childhood, and her creations that she obsessed about. And because of the time lapse between the present and the last time she interacted with her creations, she made them all older.
These are the deadliest TikTok trends to ever exist, Part 5.
Up first is the Tooth Filling Challenge. In this challenge, people rub their teeth extremely hard with a nail file. And as you could assume, this is not good for your teeth. Dentists and dental students had to explain why this challenge was so dangerous. People who did this challenge completely destroyed their tooth enamel and damaged their teeth beyond repair. This challenge is completely stupid, and who in their right mind would grind their teeth with a nail file?
These are scary cartoon truths that would terrify you, Part 6.
Okay, so the Flintstones actually took place in a post-apocalyptic world. The Flintstones live in a world where technology like TV, record players, and cars once existed, but due to a devastating nuclear war, they are now forced to rebuild in the Stone Age. But what's even crazier, those who are wealthy enough to leave Earth, like the Jetsons, are living a very rich and futuristic life in space, and the Jetsons and Flintstones are taking place at the same time. And one family is living the dream above the clouds, and the other is living in a post-apocalyptic world.
These are scary cartoon truths that would terrify you, Part 7.
Okay, so every character in SpongeBob represents one of the deadly sins. Patrick is a sloth, which is excessive laziness. We all know Patrick is extremely lazy and is unemployed and lives under a rock. And he sleeps a lot. Next up, Squidward is wrath, which is uncontrolled emotions of anger and hatred. Squidward hates his life, his job, and honestly everybody. Next up is Mr. Krabs, who is greed. Greed is a selfish desire for something, especially wealth or money. Mr. Krabs is completely addicted to money, just so he could have it all to himself. Finally, Pearl is lust. Lust is an intense sexual desire, and we all know Pearl is extremely boy crazy, and is obsessed with male fish pop stars.
These are scary cartoon truths that would terrify you, Part 8.
Okay, so the Teletubbies is a dark nightmare about genetically engineered slave creatures being systematically trained to become part of our society. The Teletubbies aren't in control of their own destiny, and 3 things control their day-to-day life. First is the voice, which is a tiny female voice that tells them when they could eat, sleep, say hello, or even say goodbye. The robotic voice comes from a speaker in the ground, hinting that something larger lies beneath. Next up is Nunu. He is a harmless vacuum cleaning robot who follows the Teletubbies and cleans up all the messes that they make, and also yelling at them for bad decisions. Nunu is just the watchdog of the Teletubbies. Finally is the pinwheel. Whenever the pinwheel starts to spin, the Teletubbies stop everything they're doing and run to the top of the hill to perform a ritual. People believe the Teletubbies is based on the end of the world.
These are scary cartoon truths that would terrify you, Part 9.
Okay, so Carl is dead, and he died at the beginning of the movie. And everything that happens after is his journey to heaven. Russell was Carl's guardian angel, and Russell needed one last badge, which was a badge for assisting the elderly. But this is the last act that Russell needs to do in order to earn his wings. Russell tells Carl he could help him cross the street or anything, but at the end he helps him cross into the afterlife. And Carl's guardian angel is a kid, because him and his wife Ellie could never have kids. Also, Carl's house represents his physical attachment towards the world, while Paradise Falls is heaven. And the rising of his house into the sky represents him leaving the physical world and going to the spiritual world. And when Carl finally gets to Paradise Falls, he completes his transition and finally reunites with Ellie in heaven.
These are scary cartoon truths that would terrify you, part 10.
Okay, so Hello Kitty was created back in the 1970s by a Chinese woman whose daughter had cancer. The doctors told the mother there was nothing she could do, and her daughter will die. The mother then went to every church and prayed for her daughter, but none of it worked. The mother then became very desperate and turned to devil worshipping and satanic rituals. She then made a pact with the devil himself. But if the devil cured her daughter's cancer, he wanted one thing in return. He wanted her to create a cartoon character to appeal to children all over the world and to trick people into worshipping the devil. And when her daughter recovered from cancer, she kept her promise and created Hello Kitty. Hello Kitty has no mouth because her daughter had mouth cancer. Her pointy ears represent the devil's horns. The word kitty means demon in Chinese, so Hello Kitty actually means hello demon.
These are scary cartoon truths that would terrify you, part 11.
Okay, so Lilo from Lilo and Stitch is actually Moana, but she died in the beginning of the movie when her boat crashed and her foot got stuck in coral, drowning her. It's the reason she's able to communicate with her dead grandmother, and explains how she was able to follow Maui, who's a demigod, into the underworld, where obviously mortals cannot go. Maui is her guardian angel, who's tasked with taking her to Te Fiti, which represents heaven, and the entire movie is Moana's journey to the afterlife.
These are scary cartoon truths that would terrify you, part 12.
Okay, so Talking Angela started as a mobile phone app for a lot of children. Angela is a white cat with blue eyes who has conversations with you and could answer any question you ask. But recently, Talking Angela turned into an app to spy on young children. It is said the app was taken over by a creepy man or a very creepy group. It's said that if you're over 18, nothing happens, but if you're younger than that, the cat will then start asking you very weird questions, like where do you live, what is your name, and what are your parents' names. The creepy man or group are able to take pictures of you through your own phone. Also, if you zoom in on Angela's eye, you can see a man watching you. And if that's not scary enough, a young boy named Eli went missing shortly after downloading the app, and he was never found.
These are scary cartoon truths that would terrify you, part 13.
Okay, so everybody knows Finding Nemo is about a father looking for his son, but actually that is not true. Nemo in Latin actually means nobody, so the name of the movie is actually Finding Nobody, which means in reality Nemo isn't real and was just made up in his dad Marlin's mind. He did this to cope with the loss of his wife and his almost children. And all the characters Marlin meets throughout the movie actually help him become less paranoid. The sharks taught him that threats aren't always life-ending forces of nature, so worrying about the little things is no way to live life. The turtles taught him that he cannot be in control of everything that's going on in his life, and that life is going to throw you curveballs, and you just have to react in the moment. Finally, Dory teaches him to enjoy every moment like it's your last, and to stop worrying about everything.
These are scary cartoon truths that would terrify you, part 14.
Okay, so in The Lion King, we all remember this scene where Mufasa dies. Sigma then later finds his dead body, but they never actually showed what happened to the body. You would think the hyenas ate it, but hyenas actually don't touch lions. And there is no other animal that eats lions besides lions themselves. But here's when it gets crazy. Look at this picture of Scar. He's playing with some sort of animal's skull, which so happens to look exactly like a lion's skull. So does this mean that Scar ate his own dead brother's body?
These are scary cartoon truths that would terrify you, part 15.
Okay, so Sesame Street's theme song just isn't catchy, There's actually a secret message behind it that is extremely sinister. It actually gives you clues on how to access the fantasy land of Sesame Street, meaning that the song tells you to take your own life, so you could ascend to the fantasy land of Sesame Street. The song says that it is a cloudy day, and that you have to bring a broom, so you could wipe away all the clouds. Once you get there, Oscar the Grouch will be waiting at the entrance, and the password to get in is everything's okay. But if you don't seem okay and happy, Oscar the Grouch will not let you in, and nobody knows what happens after that. Apparently many people have tried to access Sesame Street, but nobody really knows if they ever got there.
These are scary cartoon truths that'll terrify you, part 16.
Charlie Brown apparently has cancer. The most obvious clue that Charlie Brown has cancer is that he is mostly bald except for the one small tuft of hair on the front of his head. No other character in the show appears as bald, so it implies that it just wasn't a random characteristic style. The other odd thing about Charlie Brown is his down and out personality. He's always dealing with existential crises, way deeper than any normal 8-year-old should contemplate. The theory goes on to suggest the reason that nothing ever works out for him, and his life is always a disaster, is because he's in a hospital bed, slowly fading away and projecting his sadness into dreams.
These are scary cartoon truths that'll terrify you, part 17.
Okay, so Garfield is actually hallucinating from starving to death. Garfield seems like your normal house cat, but he eats 10 times his body weight and still feels hungry. Normal house cats can do that if they're starving to death. Garfield was actually abandoned by John long ago, and he's slowly starving to death while hallucinating the memories of a more comfortable life. This theory was even shown in the 1989 Garfield Halloween special. Garfield wakes up to find the house empty, then looks outside to find the windows boarded up and the grass overgrown. This is so traumatic to Garfield that he forces himself back into the hallucination, and the never-ending cycle continues.
These are scary cartoon truths that'll terrify you, part 18.
The Bikini Bottom is the result of a nuclear testing, and every single character is just a mutant that resulted from the nuclear testing. Nickelodeon also said that the Bikini Bottom is actually just a bikini atoll. And if you don't know what the Bikini Atoll is, it was the actual testing site where the United States set off multiple nuclear weapons in 1946. And one bomb was specifically detonated underwater, which is what created the Bikini Bottom. And every single one of the mutant characters, like a talking sponge, a squirrel underwater, and a talking crab that is obsessed with money.
These are scary cartoon truths that'll terrify you, part 20.
Okay, so Rick's Morty is not his original Morty. According to this theory, he abandoned his original Morty, as seen in the title song sequence of the pilot episode, where Rick and Morty are both running from giant frog monsters, and Rick then jumps through a portal, leaving Morty to fight off the frog creatures himself. Fans theorize that this Morty actually fought off the frog creatures, and went on to become Evil Morty. This is actually insane, so let me know what you think about this.